The rain drummed against the hospital windows as Maria sat in the sterile waiting room, her hands trembling as she clutched the test results. 3 years of marriage, 2 years of trying, and countless doctor visits had led to this moment. The words on the paper blurred through her tears, but she had memorized them already. Severe fertility issues. Pregnancy highly unlikely without medical intervention. Her husband Jake was at work, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. He had been so excited that morning, kissing her goodbye and reminding her to call him as soon as she got the results. "Today we find out when we're going to be parents," he had said with his usual optimism. Maria had smiled and nodded, but deep inside, she had been preparing herself for the worst. The drive home felt endless. Every street they passed reminded her of conversations they had shared about their future children. That house with the tire swing where Jake had said their kids would love to play. The elementary school where he had pointed out the playground equipment and wondered if their daughter would prefer swings or monkey bars. The ice cream shop where they had already planned to take their family for Sunday treats. Maria pulled into their driveway and sat in the car for several minutes, trying to compose herself. Their small house looked so hopeful with its freshly painted shutters and the garden Jake had planted last spring. He had chosen flowers that would bloom all season long, saying he wanted their home to always look welcoming for when they brought their baby home from the hospital inside. The house felt different somehow. The spare bedroom they had been secretly calling the nursery seemed to mock her as she walked past. Jake had already started researching cribs and changing tables, bookmarking websites on their shared computer. He spent his lunch breaks reading parenting blogs and texting her funny articles about diaper disasters and sleepless nights. Maria made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, where they ate breakfast together every morning. This was where Jake would read her interesting news stories and where she would tell him about her plans for the day. It was where they dreamed out loud about baby names and discussed whether they wanted to know the gender in advance or be surprised. Phone rang twice that afternoon. The first call was from her mother, asking if she had heard anything from the doctor yet. Maria could not bring herself to answer, letting it go to voicemail. The second call was from her best friend Lisa, who had recently announced her own pregnancy. Maria stared at the phone until it stopped ringing, feeling guilty for avoiding someone who had been nothing but supportive. When Jake's truck pulled into the driveway at 5:30, Maria felt her heart begin to race. She could see his eager expression through the kitchen window as he bounded up the front steps. He burst through the door with his usual energy, dropping his lunchbox and keys on the counter before wrapping her in a hug. "So what did the doctor say? When do we start picking out baby furniture?" Jake's face was bright with anticipation. He had been more excited about starting their family than anyone else Maria knew, often saying that becoming a father was his greatest dream. Maria looked into his warm brown eyes and felt her carefully prepared words dissolve. She had planned to be strong, to deliver the news calmly, and then discuss their options rationally. Instead, she burst into tears and buried her face against his chest. Jake held her tightly, his excitement immediately replaced by concern. "Hey, what's wrong, Maria? Talk to me. What did the doctor say?" Through her sobs, Maria managed to tell him about the test results. She explained the medical terms as best she could. Watching Jake's face change from confusion to understanding to something that looked like grief, when she finished talking, they stood together in their kitchen, holding each other while the weight of the news settled between them. "So what does this mean exactly?" Jake asked quietly. "Are you saying we can't have children at all?" Back to look at him, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "The doctor said natural conception is very unlikely. There are treatments we could try, but they're expensive and not guaranteed to work. Even with medical help, the chances are still pretty low." Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Maria watched his face, terrified that she would see disappointment or blame in his expression. She had spent the entire afternoon imagining different scenarios, wondering if this news would change how he felt about their marriage. "Okay, Jake," said finally. "Okay, we'll figure this out. There are options, right? Treatments, adoption, other ways to build our family?" Maria nodded, surprised by his calm response. She had expected him to be more upset, to need time to grieve. The biological children they might never have. Instead, he seemed to be already shifting into problem-solving mode. "I've been doing research," Maria admitted. "The fertility treatments are really expensive, and our insurance doesn't cover most of it. We're talking about thousands of dollars for each attempt, and there's no guarantee any of it will work." Jake pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down, gesturing for Maria to join him. "Tell me everything you learned, all the options, all the costs, all the details. We'll figure out what makes sense for us." They spent the next 2 hours at the kitchen table, going through websites and pamphlets that Maria had collected from the doctor's office. Jake asked thoughtful questions and took notes in his careful handwriting. He researched success rates and read testimonials from other couples who had faced similar challenges. As the evening progressed, Maria felt some of her panic begin to subside. Jake's steady presence and practical approach reminded her that they were a team, that this obstacle was something they would face together. He never once suggested that the problem was her fault or that he regretted marrying her. "We don't have to decide anything tonight," Jake said as they finally closed the last pamphlet. "This is a lot to process, and we should take our time figuring out the right path forward." That night, as they lay in bed discussing their options, Maria felt grateful for the man beside her. Jake's unwavering support and optimism gave her hope that their story was not over, just taking an unexpected turn. 6 months had passed since the devastating diagnosis. Maria and Jake had thrown themselves into learning everything possible about their options. Their kitchen table had become a research station covered with medical journals, fertility clinic brochures, and adoption agency information. They attended support group meetings and consulted with 3 different specialists, each offering slightly different perspectives on their situation. The financial reality was overwhelming. A single round of IVF treatment would cost nearly $15,000, and most couples needed multiple attempts. Their savings account, which they had been building for a house down payment, would barely cover one cycle. Jake had already started working overtime shifts at the construction company, and Maria had taken on freelance accounting work in the evenings. "Maybe we should consider adoption," Maria suggested one evening, as they reviewed their finances for the 100th time. "There are programs that don't cost as much as the medical treatments." Jake looked up from the calculator he had been using to crunch numbers. "Is that what you want?" "I mean really want, not just what seems practical." Maria hesitated. The truth was that she desperately wanted to experience pregnancy, to feel their baby growing inside her, to share those magical moments with Jake. But wanting something and being able to afford it were 2 different things. "I want a family with you," she said finally, however that happens. Their marriage had grown stronger through this challenge, but it had also become more serious, more focused on this single goal. They rarely talked about anything else anymore. Date nights were spent researching fertility clinics instead of enjoying each other's company. Their conversations revolved around ovulation schedules, hormone levels, and treatment timelines. Jake's sister Amy visited that weekend with her twin toddlers, and Maria watched him play with his nephews in the backyard. His face lit up as he pushed them on the tire swing he had hung from the old oak tree. The boys giggled and shrieked with delight, begging Uncle Jake for higher pushes and longer turns. "He's going to make such a wonderful father," Amy said, sitting beside Maria on the back porch. "I know this is hard, but don't give up hope. My friend Sarah tried for 4 years before she got pregnant naturally. Sometimes these things just take time." Maria appreciated Amy's encouragement, but she also felt the sting of well-meaning advice from people who had never faced fertility issues. Everyone had a story about someone who got pregnant after giving up, or who conceived naturally right after starting adoption paperwork, or who found success with some alternative treatment they read about online the following Monday. Maria had an appointment with Dr. Peterson, the fertility specialist they had decided to work with. Jake insisted on coming along, even though it meant missing a half day of work. They sat in the waiting room, surrounded by other hopeful couples, everyone speaking in hushed, anxious voices. Dr. Peterson reviewed Maria's latest test results with his usual clinical demeanor. "Your hormone levels have improved slightly with the medication we prescribed, which is encouraging. I think we should consider moving forward with IUI as a first step. It's less invasive and less expensive than IVF." Jake leaned forward in his chair, What are the success rates for someone with Maria's specific condition? For women in Maria's age group with similar issues, you see about a 20% success rate per cycle with IUI. If that doesn't work after 3 attempts, we would recommend moving to IVF, which has higher success rates, but also higher costs and more physical demands. 20%. Maria tried to feel hopeful about those odds, but it meant an 80% chance of disappointment each month. Still, it was something, and Jake seemed encouraged by the doctor's recommendation. They scheduled the first IUI treatment for the following month, which gave them time to complete the necessary preparations. Maria would need to take fertility drugs to stimulate egg production, then monitor her cycle carefully to time the procedure correctly. Jake would need to provide a sample at the clinic on the day of the treatment. The medication made Maria feel awful. The hormone injections gave her headaches and mood swings that left her crying over television. Commercials and snapping at Jake over minor irritations. Her body felt foreign to her, bloated and uncomfortable. She gained weight despite eating carefully, and her skin broke out like a teenager's. "I looked horrible," Maria complained one morning as she struggled to button her work pants. A science experiment. Jake wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they looked in the bathroom mirror together. "You look beautiful to me. This is temporary. We're doing whatever it takes to have our baby." The day of the first IUI procedure, they arrived at the clinic, nervous but hopeful. The procedure itself was quick and relatively painless, taking only a few minutes. Afterward, Maria lay on the examination table for 20 minutes, while Jake held her hand and made silly jokes to distract her from the clinical atmosphere. "Now we wait," Dr. Peterson said as they prepared to leave. "Try to stay relaxed and avoid strenuous activity for the next few days. We'll do a pregnancy test in 2 weeks."
Oh.
Those 2 weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maria analyzed every physical sensation, wondering if the mild cramping she felt was a sign of implantation or just her body recovering from the procedure. Jake bought a pregnancy test, but they agreed to wait for the official blood test at the clinic. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Maria was at work. She stepped into an empty conference room to take the call, her heart pounding as she heard Dr. Peterson's nurse on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, Maria. The test was negative. Dr. Peterson would like to schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss the next cycle." Maria hung up the phone and sat alone in the conference room, staring at the motivational posters on the walls. She felt empty and defeated, as if her body had betrayed her once again. The rational part of her mind knew that the odds had been against them. But hope had been stronger than logic. She called Jake from the parking lot. Not trusting herself to have this conversation inside the office building, he answered on the first ring, his voice full of anticipation. "It didn't work," Maria said simply, too tired for euphemisms or gentle explanations. Jake was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming to get you. Don't drive home alone." When Jake's truck pulled into the parking lot 20 minutes later, Maria saw that his eyes were red-rimmed. He had been hoping just as much as she had, maybe more. They held each other in the front seat of his truck while office workers walked past on their way to lunch meetings and normal lives. "We'll try again," Jake said into her hair. This was just the first attempt. Dr. Peterson said it might take several tries. Maria wanted to share his optimism, but the physical and emotional toll of the failed cycle had drained her completely. The thought of going through the medications, the monitoring, the procedure, and the waiting all over again felt overwhelming that night. They ordered pizza and watched mindless television shows, avoiding the elephant in the room. Neither of them mentioned the unused pregnancy test sitting in their bathroom cabinet or the baby name. Book still hidden in Jake's nightstand drawer. After 2 more failed IUI attempts, Maria and Jake found themselves back in Dr. Peterson's office, facing the reality that they needed to move to more aggressive treatment or consider other options. The past 4 months had been a roller coaster of hope and disappointment that left them both emotionally and financially drained. "The good news is that your body is responding well to the medications," Dr. Peterson explained, reviewing Maria's charts. "Your egg production has been excellent, and the timing has been perfect. Sometimes it just takes persistence." Maria felt Jake reach for her hand, They had agreed beforehand that this appointment would be about making a final decision on how to proceed. Their savings were nearly depleted, and Maria was exhausted from the constant cycle of hormones, procedures, and disappointment. "What about IVF?" Jake asked. "You mentioned that the success rates are higher." Dr. Peterson nodded. "For patients in Maria's situation, we typically see success rates between 40 and 50% per cycle with IVF. The process is more involved, but it gives us much better control over the variables." 50%. It sounded so much more hopeful than the 20% they had been working with, but the cost was nearly 3 times higher. Maria had done the math countless times. One IVF cycle would wipe out the rest of their savings and require them to take out a loan. "We need some time to think about it," Maria said quietly. "This is a big decision for us." Dr. Peterson seemed to understand their hesitation. "Take all the time you need. IVF is a significant commitment, both financially and emotionally. Some couples find it helpful to speak with a counselor who specializes in fertility issues." The drive home, they barely spoke. The weight of the decision hung between them like a heavy curtain. Maria stared out the window at the suburban neighborhoods they passed, watching families in their yards and children playing on sidewalks. Everything seemed to remind her of what they were struggling to achieve. "I can pick up more overtime shifts," Jake said finally as they pulled into their driveway. "And you mentioned that accounting firm downtown was looking for part-time help during tax season." Maria turned to look at her husband. "Jake, we've already put our entire lives on hold for this. When was the last time we went out to dinner, or took a vacation, or even watched a movie that wasn't about fertility treatments?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "Are you saying you want to stop trying?" The question hung in the air between them. Maria had been asking herself the same thing for weeks, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel more real and more frightening. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm just so tired of living in 2-week cycles, of measuring every day by where I am in my cycle, of having our entire relationship revolve around making a baby." That evening, they sat on their back porch with cups of coffee, watching the sunset paint their garden in golden light. Jake had been unusually quiet since their conversation in the car, and Maria could see him wrestling with his own doubts and fears. "What if we took a break?" Jake suggested. Just for a few months. "We could stop all the treatments and try to remember what we used to enjoy about being together." Maria felt a wave of relief at his suggestion. The constant pressure to optimize every aspect of their lives for fertility had taken a toll on their marriage that she had not fully acknowledged until now. "You wouldn't resent me for giving up?" "You're not giving up," Jake said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. You've been through hell for the past year, and you've never complained once. If you need a break, then that's what we'll do." Hey. Decided to take the summer off from fertility treatments. No medications, no monitoring, no scheduled procedures. Instead, they would focus on reconnecting with each other and remembering why they had fallen in love in the first place. The first weekend of their fertility vacation, Jake surprised Maria with a camping trip to the state park where they had had their first date 7 years earlier. They hiked the same trails they had explored when they were just getting to know each other, talking about dreams and goals that had nothing to do with having children. "I forgot how much I loved your laugh," Jake said as they sat by their campfire. That evening, Maria had been telling him a funny story about her coworker's cat. She realized she had not laughed that freely in months. Without the constant stress of treatments and monitoring, Maria began to feel like herself again. Her body recovered from the hormone treatments and her natural energy returned. She started painting again, a hobby she had abandoned when fertility treatments took over her life. Jake began playing guitar again in the evenings, something he had not done since they started trying to conceive. They went to movies and restaurants, took spontaneous weekend trips, and stayed out late with friends. For the first time in over a year, they made love without thinking about ovulation schedules or optimal timing. It was just about them, about their connection and their love for each other. One evening in July, Maria was working in her garden when she felt a wave of nausea that seemed to come out of nowhere. Now, she had been feeling slightly off for a few days, but she attributed it to the summer heat and her new job stress. When the nausea persisted for 3 days, she began to wonder. If she had caught a stomach bug, maybe you should see a doctor, Jake suggested, when she could not finish her breakfast for the third morning in a row. This might be something more than a virus. Maria made an appointment with her regular physician, Dr. Williams, expecting to be prescribed medicine for a stomach infection. She mentioned her recent nausea and fatigue, along with some other symptoms she had been experiencing but had not really paid attention. Dr. Williams listened to her symptoms with growing interest. "When was your last menstrual period?" asked. Maria had to think about it. Without the constant cycle monitoring they had been doing for months, she had not been paying close attention to her natural rhythm. "Maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago? I haven't been tracking it lately." "Would you mind if we did a pregnancy test?" Dr. Williams asked. "Some of your symptoms are consistent with early pregnancy." Maria felt her heart skip a beat. "That's not possible. We've been trying for over 2 years with medical help. A body doesn't get pregnant on its own." But Dr. Williams was already preparing the test. "Sometimes the body surprises us. Stress can have a significant impact on fertility, and relaxation can sometimes allow natural processes to resume." The 10 minutes they waited for the test results felt like hours. Maria called Jake from the doctor's office, her voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "They're running a pregnancy test," she told him. "I know it's probably negative, but Dr. Williams thinks my symptoms might be related to pregnancy." Jake was quiet for a moment. "You want me to come down there? No, I'll be home soon either." "Wait. I just wanted you to know what was happening." When Dr. Williams returned with the test results, she was smiling. "Congratulations, Maria. You're pregnant. Based on your symptoms and the strength of the test, I would estimate you're about 6 weeks along." Maria stared at the doctor in complete shock. After all the medical interventions, all the precisely timed procedures, all the hormone treatments and careful monitoring, her body had done what it was supposed to do naturally, quietly, during the one time they had stopped trying so hard. The drive home was surreal. Maria kept looking at the ultrasound referral in her hand, proof that this was really happening. She had imagined this moment so many times during their fertility journey, but she had always pictured it happening after a successful treatment. Not during their break from trying. Jake was waiting in the driveway when she pulled up, his face full of anxious anticipation. Maria got out of the car slowly, still processing the incredible news herself. "Well?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria held up the ultrasound referral, unable to find words for what had just happened. Jake stared at the paper for a moment before looking back at her face, searching for confirmation that he was. "Understanding correctly, we're having a baby?" he asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're having a baby," Maria confirmed. And then they were both crying and laughing and holding each other in their driveway, overwhelmed by the miracle they had never expected to receive. The first ultrasound appointment felt different from all the medical procedures Maria had endured during their fertility treatments. Instead of the clinical atmosphere of the reproductive clinic, this was a celebration, a confirmation of the miracle that had happened naturally when they had stopped trying so hard. Jake squeezed Maria's hand as the ultrasound technician spread gel across her still flat belly. They had been afraid to get too excited, worried that something might be wrong after all their previous struggles. But when the tiny image appeared on the screen, along with the rapid flutter of a heartbeat, their fears melted away. "There's your baby," the technician said with a warm smile. "Everything looks perfect for 8 weeks. The heartbeat is strong and right where it should be." Maria stared at the grainy black and white image, trying to make sense of the tiny form that would become their child. Jake was crying openly, his face pressed close to hers as they watched their baby's heart beating on the monitor. "Can we get pictures?" Jake asked, his voice thick with emotion. They left the appointment with a strip of ultrasound photos that Jake immediately insisted on showing to the receptionist, parking attendant, and 3 strangers they passed on their way to the car. Maria had never seen him so purely happy, so completely overwhelmed with joy. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. After years of medical intervention and carefully monitored cycles, Maria's body seemed to know exactly what to do. Her morning sickness was manageable, and her energy returned by the 2nd trimester. Most importantly, all the tests and checkups showed a healthy Developing baby. Dr. Williams had referred them to an obstetrician, Dr. Martinez, who was experienced with patients who had struggled with fertility issues. She understood their heightened anxiety and was patient with their questions and concerns at every appointment. "It's normal to be worried," Dr. Martinez assured them during their 12-week checkup. "After what you've been through, it makes sense that you would be cautious about celebrating. But this baby is doing exceptionally well. You can start to relax and enjoy being pregnant." Jake had already converted their spare bedroom into a nursery, unable to contain his excitement despite Maria's initial nervousness about preparing to. Early, he spent evenings researching baby gear and reading parenting books with the same intensity he had once devoted to fertility treatments. "What if we have a boy?" Jake asked one evening as they sat in the newly painted nursery assembling a crib that had taken them 3 hours to figure out. "Do you think he'll like baseball? I could teach him to throw a curveball." Maria laughed, watching her husband get lost in daydreams about their child. "What if we have a girl who wants to play baseball? Did you teach her to throw a curveball?" "Two. Absolutely," Jake said without hesitation. "I'll teach this baby everything I know, regardless of what they're interested in." At the 20-week ultrasound, they learned they were having a daughter. Jake cried harder at this appointment than he had at any of the previous ones, overwhelmed by the reality of having a little girl to protect and cherish. They chose the name Isabella, after Jake's grandmother, who had passed away the year before. "Going to be so spoiled," Maria said as she watched Jake study the ultrasound photos with a magnifying glass, trying to make out tiny features in the grainy images. "Good," Jake replied seriously. "After everything we went through to get her here, she deserves to be spoiled." The pregnancy brought unexpected healing to their relationship. The stress and clinical focus of fertility treatments had created distance between them. But carrying their miracle baby naturally restored the intimacy and spontaneity they had lost. They talked about the future with excitement rather than desperate hope. Maria's mother visited during the second trimester, bringing boxes of baby clothes she had been saving for years. "I never stopped believing this day would come," she said, as she and Maria sorted through tiny dresses and sleepers. "Some blessings just take longer to arrive." The baby shower was a celebration unlike anything Maria had ever experienced. Friends and family who had supported them through their fertility struggles, overjoyed to finally celebrate this long-awaited pregnancy. Jake insisted on being involved in all the planning, creating elaborate games and decorations as if this were the most important party ever thrown. During the shower, Maria's friend Lisa, who had announced her pregnancy right around the time of Maria's diagnosis, pulled her aside for a private conversation. "I owe you an apology," Lisa said quietly. "I was so wrapped up in my own pregnancy that I didn't realize how hard it was for you. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel worse during your struggle." Maria hugged her friend, grateful for the honesty and the opportunity to heal this relationship too. "You didn't do anything wrong. I was dealing with my own pain and it had nothing to do with you or your happiness." As Maria's due date approached, Jake became increasingly protective and attentive. He insisted on driving her everywhere, carrying anything heavier than a coffee cup, and monitoring her every discomfort with worried intensity. "The baby isn't due for 3 weeks," Maria reminded him when he suggested they should probably head to the hospital because she had mentioned feeling some back pain. "I just don't want to take any chances," Jake replied, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "We've waited so long for her. I want everything to be perfect." Maria understood his anxiety because she felt it too. After years of disappointment and medical complications, it was hard to believe that something so important to them could proceed normally. Every appointment, every milestone, every normal symptom felt like a small miracle. The nursery was completed and ready 6 weeks before the due date. Jake had installed a sound monitor system that would allow them to hear Isabella from anywhere in the house. He had researched the safest car seats, the most reliable baby monitors, and the best brands of everything they could possibly need. "I think we're ready," Maria said one evening as they stood in the doorway of the nursery, admiring the careful preparations they had made for their daughter. Jake wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands spanning her round belly, where Isabella was growing strong and healthy. "I've been ready to be your father since the day I met you," he said softly. I just didn't know it would happen this way." Maria leaned back against her husband's chest, feeling their daughter move and shift inside her. The journey to this moment had been longer and more difficult than they had ever imagined, but it had also taught them lessons about perseverance, faith, and the different forms that miracles could take. 3 weeks later, Maria woke up at 2 in the morning with the unmistakable sensation of contractions beginning. Unlike the carefully monitored and medically managed procedures they had become accustomed to, this was their baby's natural decision that it was time to make her entrance into the world. "Jake," Maria said softly, shaking her sleeping husband, "I think it's time." Jake was instantly alert, his months of preparation kicking into action. Had packed hospital bags weeks ago and had memorized the fastest route to the maternity ward. As he helped Maria get dressed and gathered their things, they both realized that their years-long journey to parenthood was finally reaching its destination. The contractions were still mild and far apart as they drove through the quiet streets toward the hospital. Maria felt calm and excited rather than frightened. After everything they had been through, labor and delivery seemed like the easy part of bringing their daughter into the world. The labor progressed steadily through the early morning hours. Maria found herself surprisingly calm as the contractions grew stronger and more frequent. After years of medical procedures and uncertainty, there was something deeply satisfying about her body finally doing what it was designed to do naturally and without intervention. Jake never left her side, holding her hand through contractions and helping her breathe through the intensity. The nurses commented on what a supportive partner he was, but Maria knew this was just Jake being Jake. He had been her rock through every disappointment and setback, and now he was here for the most important moment of their lives. "Amazing," Jake whispered, during a brief break between contractions. "She's almost here. Our little miracle is almost here." Dr. Martinez arrived at the hospital around 8 in the morning, checking Maria's progress with the same gentle confidence she had shown throughout the pregnancy. "You're at 7 centimeters, she announced. "Isabella should be making her appearance sometime in the next few hours." The reality of meeting their daughter soon made both Maria and Jake emotional. They had imagined this moment so many times during their fertility struggles, but it had always seemed impossibly far away. Now it was actually happening, and there, baby would be in their arms before lunch. As the morning progressed, the contractions became more intense, but Maria felt strong and determined. Every surge of pain brought them closer to meeting Isabella, and that knowledge gave her strength she did not know she possessed. Jake coached her breathing and reminded her of the techniques they had learned in their childbirth class. "I can see her head," Dr. Martinez announced during one particularly strong contraction. "She has dark hair, just like her daddy." Jake leaned over to see their daughter beginning to emerge, and Maria watched his face transform with wonder and disbelief. "She's really coming," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Maria, she's really here." The final stage of labor happened quickly. With 3 more pushes, Isabella slipped into the world at 11:47 a.m., announcing her arrival with a strong, healthy cry that filled the delivery room. Dr. Martinez immediately placed her on Maria's chest. Both parents began crying at the sight of their perfect daughter. Isabella was beautiful, with Jake's dark hair and what appeared to be Maria's nose and mouth. She was alert and active, looking around the room with bright, curious eyes. Maria could not stop staring at her, amazed that this tiny person had been growing inside her for 9 months. "She's perfect," Jake said, gently touching Isabella's tiny fingers. "Look at those little hands. She's absolutely perfect." The next few hours passed in a blur of measurements, tests, and paperwork, but Isabella passed every assessment with flying colors. Weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and was 20 inches long. Her APGAR scores were excellent, and she showed no signs of any complications or health issues when they were finally alone in the recovery room. Jake sat in the chair beside Maria's bed, holding Isabella with the careful reverence of someone who could not quite believe she was real. Maria watched her husband fall in love with their daughter, seeing a gentleness in him that she had never witnessed before. "Hi, Isabella," Jake said softly to the baby in his arms. "I'm your daddy, and I've been waiting to meet you for such a long time. Your mommy and I love you so much already." Isabella seemed to listen to his voice, her dark eyes focusing on his face with remarkable attention for such a young baby. When she wrapped her tiny fist around Jake's finger, he looked at Maria with tears streaming down his cheeks. "I can't believe she's really ours," he said. "After everything we went through, she's really here, and she's really ours." The first night in the hospital was magical. Isabella was a calm, content baby who slept peacefully between feedings and seemed to enjoy being held by her parents. Nurses were amazed by how alert and responsive she was, commenting that she seemed like an especially bright and aware newborn. Maria's mother arrived the next morning, crying the moment she saw her granddaughter. "She looks just like you did when you were born," she told Maria. The same serious expression, like she's trying to figure out this new world she's entered. Jake's parents drove in from out of state, unable to wait any longer to meet their first grandchild. Jake's father, usually a reserved man, broke down completely when he held Isabella for the first time. "She's a miracle," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything you two have been through, she's truly a miracle." The hospital staff had heard their story from Dr. Martinez, and many of the nurses made special trips to visit Isabella during their shifts. Their fertility journey had been long and public within their medical community, and everyone who had supported them along the way wanted to celebrate this incredible outcome. Dr. Peterson, their fertility specialist, even stopped by to meet Isabella during his rounds at the hospital. "I have to admit, this is not how I expected your story to end," he said with a smile. "Sometimes the body has its own wisdom that we don't fully understand." Maria found herself thinking about all the other couples still struggling with fertility, issues still sitting in waiting rooms and hoping for their own miracles. She made a mental note to write a letter to their support group, sharing Isabella's story as proof that hope should never be abandoned completely. The feeding came naturally to Maria. Another small miracle after all their concerns about potential complications. Isabella latched immediately and seemed to know exactly what to do. The pediatrician pronounced her perfectly healthy and ready to go home after the standard 2-day stay. "Are you ready to take her home?" Jake asked on their last morning in the hospital. He had spent the night sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside Maria's bed. Unwilling to leave his wife and daughter even for a few hours, Maria looked around the hospital room where they had become a family of 3. "I think so. It's going to be strange, just the 3 of us at home." Jake carefully placed Isabella in her car seat, taking extra time to make sure every strap was perfectly adjusted. He had practiced installing and removing the car seat dozens of times, but now that their actual baby was depending on it, checked and double-checked every connection. The drive home was slow and careful, with Jake treating every bump in the road like a major obstacle. Maria sat in the back seat next to Isabella, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, despite her parents' nervous energy. Their house looked different when they pulled into the driveway. The same building they had left 2 days earlier now felt like a real family home, a place where they would raise their daughter and create memories together. The nursery they had prepared so carefully was finally going to fulfill its purpose. Inside, Jake carried Isabella directly to the nursery, showing her the room they had decorated with such hope and anticipation. "This is your room, sweetheart," he said softly. "Mommy and I made it beautiful just for you." Isabella seemed to take in her surroundings with remarkable awareness for a 2-day-old baby. Her dark eyes moved around the room, focusing on the mobile Jake had hung over her crib and the soft colors Maria had chosen for the walls. That first night at home, they took turns holding Isabella, neither parent wanting to put her down for very long. They had waited so long to have her in their arms that sleeping seemed like a waste of precious time with their daughter. "She's really ours," Maria said, as she fed Isabella in the quiet darkness of their bedroom. "I keep expecting someone to tell us there's been a mistake, that she belongs to someone else." Jake reached over to stroke Isabella's soft hair as she nursed. "No mistake. She belongs exactly where she is, with parents who love her more than anything in the world." The first weeks of parenthood brought challenges and exhaustion, but also joy beyond anything they had imagined. Isabella was a good baby who slept in reasonable stretches and seemed content most of the time. Maria recovered quickly from delivery, her body bouncing back with the same efficiency it had shown throughout the pregnancy. Friends and family visited regularly, bringing meals and gifts and offering to help with household tasks. Had supported them through their fertility struggles, wanted to celebrate Isabella's arrival and marvel at the miracle they had all witnessed. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Maria said one evening, as they sat together in the nursery, taking turns rocking Isabella before bedtime. "All those months when we took a break from treatments, when we thought we were giving up, that's when she was meant to come to us." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe we needed to stop trying so hard to make it happen. Maybe we needed to trust that it would happen when the time was right." As Isabella grew stronger and more alert in her first month of life, Maria and Jake began to understand that their fertility journey had not been a series of failures leading to success. Instead, it had been preparation for the parents they needed to become for this specific child. Every disappointment had taught them patience, every setback had strengthened their relationship, and every moment of uncertainty had deepened their capacity for gratitude. Looking at their daughter sleeping peacefully in her crib, they knew that Isabella had been worth every moment of struggle, every tear, and every doubt they had experienced. She was not just the baby they had desperately wanted, but the exact child they were meant to raise together. 6 months after Isabella's birth, Maria and Jake found themselves in a place they had never imagined during their years of fertility struggles. Their daughter was thriving, meeting every milestone with enthusiasm and curiosity. She had Jake's easy smile and Maria's determined personality, along with a brightness that seemed uniquely her own. The sleepless nights and constant feedings had been challenging, but nothing compared to the emotional roller coaster of fertility treatments. Parenthood felt natural and joyful in a way that making a baby never had. Every day brought new discoveries as Isabella learned to focus on faces, respond to voices, and interact with her world. "Look at her," Jake said one morning, as Isabella lay on her playmat, batting at colorful toys hanging above her. "She's trying so hard to grab that butterfly. She's so determined." Maria watched their daughter's concentrated efforts, remembering her own determination during their fertility journey. "I wonder if that's something she got from both of us. We're both pretty stubborn when we want something." Jake laughed, picking up Isabella to nuzzle her neck and make her giggle. "Good thing, too, or she might never have made it here." The pediatrician visits were a source of pure joy for both parents. After years of disappointing medical appointments and negative test results, hearing that Isabella was perfect and healthy never got old. She was in the 75th percentile for height and weight. Her motor skills were advanced for her age, and her social development was remarkable. "She's an exceptionally alert baby," Dr. Chen observed during Isabella's 6-month checkup. "The way she tracks movement and responds to voices suggests advanced cognitive development. You should be very proud." Maria and Jake exchanged glances, still amazed that they were the parents receiving such positive reports. After years of hearing about problems and complications, celebrating their daughter's perfect health felt like a daily miracle. Isabella's first laugh came at 4 months. "Ow!" Triggered by Jake making silly faces during a diaper change. The sound was so unexpected and delightful that both parents started crying with happiness. They spent the next hour taking turns trying to make her laugh again, recording videos to share with grandparents and friends. "I never knew a sound could make me so happy," Maria said as she watched the video of Isabella's first laugh for the 10th time. "It's like she's telling us that she's happy to be here with us." The extended family had embraced Isabella with overwhelming love and excitement. Both sets of grandparents visited regularly, and Jake's sister Amy brought her twins over for playdates, even though Bella was too young to really interact with her cousins. Everyone who had supported them through their fertility struggles seemed to find special joy in celebrating Isabella's milestones. Maria's mother had started a photo album documenting Isabella's first year, claiming that every expression and pose was worthy of preservation. "She's such a photogenic baby," she said during one visit, snapping pictures as Isabella practiced sitting up with support. "Every picture looks like it should be in a magazine." The nursery had evolved as Isabella grew, transforming from a hopeful preparation into a lived-in space full of toys, books, and the comfortable chaos of daily baby care. The rocking chair where they had dreamed about feeding their someday baby was now worn smooth from countless feedings and story sessions. One evening, as Maria nursed Isabella before bedtime, she reflected on how completely their lives had changed. The house that had once felt empty and waiting was now filled with baby sounds, scattered toys, and the constant busyness of caring for their daughter. "Do you ever think about the fertility treatments?" Maria asked Jake as they performed their now familiar bedtime routine of feeding, changing, and settling Isabella for the night. Jake considered the question as he gently rocked their daughter. "Sometimes, but not with sadness anymore." Damn, said out. "I think about how all of that led us here to her. Maybe we needed to go through that journey to fully appreciate what we have now." Maria understood exactly what he meant. The years of struggling to conceive had taught them not to take any aspect of parenthood for granted, but they celebrated every small milestone because they understood how precious and fragile the opportunity to be. Isabella's parents really was. Isabella's first word came at 7 months. It was Dada, much to Jake's delight and Maria's mock indignation. She said it clearly and repeatedly, seeming to understand that the sound got a wonderful reaction from the tall man who was usually holding her. "She's definitely Daddy's girl," Maria said, watching Jake's face light up every time Isabella babbled his name. "I carried her for 9 months, went through labor and feed her every day, but she chooses to say your name first." Jake grinned, holding Isabella up to make her giggle. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mama's name will be next, and then she'll never stop talking to both of us." When Isabella was 8 months old, Maria realized that she had stopped thinking about their fertility struggles as the defining experience of their relationship. The joy and busyness of raising their daughter had replaced those difficult memories with new, happier ones. They were no longer the couple who couldn't have children. They were simply Isabella's parents. "I want to write a letter to the support group," Maria told Jake one evening after they had put Isabella to bed. "I want to share our story and remind other couples not to give up hope." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "That's a beautiful idea. Your story could be exactly what someone needs to hear right now." Maria spent several evenings crafting the letter, trying to find words that would offer hope without minimizing the pain of fertility struggles. She wrote about the importance of taking care of their relationship during treatment, about the value of taking breaks when needed, about staying open to unexpected ways that miracles might arrive. The response to Maria's letter was overwhelming. She received dozens of emails from couples at various stages of their own fertility journeys, thanking her for sharing Isabella's story and expressing gratitude for the hope it provided. Several couples mentioned that her letter had convinced them to continue trying when they were ready to give up. One letter particularly touched Maria's heart. It was from a woman named Sarah who was in her 2nd year of fertility treatments. She wrote, "Your story reminds me that there are many paths to parenthood. Sometimes the most beautiful destinations are reached by unexpected routes. Thank you for showing me that miracles can happen when we least expect them." As Isabella approached her first birthday, Maria and Jake began planning a celebration that felt like more than just a typical birthday party. It was a celebration of the miracle that had brought their daughter to them, of the journey that had made them the parents she needed, and of the family they had become against all odds. "What should we wish for when we blow out our candle?" Jake asked as they discussed party plans. Maria looked at their daughter, who was playing happily with blocks on the living room floor, babbling constantly in her own special language. Isabella had learned to crawl and was attempting to pull herself up on furniture, determined to explore every corner of her world. "I don't think we need to wish for anything," Maria said finally. "We have everything we ever wanted right here." On Isabella's first birthday, surrounded by family and friends who had supported them through their darkest days, Maria and Jake watched their miracle daughter smash her first birthday cake with enthusiastic joy. Her laughter filled their home, the same home where they had once cried over negative pregnancy tests and failed treatments. As Jake held their cake-covered daughter and Maria cleaned frosting from the high chair, they both understood that Isabella's story was not just about a couple who finally got pregnant. It was about faith, perseverance, and the mysterious ways that life brings us exactly what we need exactly when we're ready to receive it. Their daughter had not just fulfilled their dream of becoming parents. She had taught them that the most precious gifts often come wrapped in unexpected packages, delivered by grace rather than effort, and received by hearts that have learned to remain open even after disappointment. Looking at Isabella's bright eyes and hearing her delighted giggles, Maria and Jake knew that every tear they had cried, every treatment they had endured, and the moment they had waited had been worth it for this perfect little girl who had chosen them to be her parents in her own perfect timing.